again, my little yarnivores and spiderettes. Fiber Spider back again with another tutorial just for you. Today we're going to be doing something a little bit different, although still stitch related. This is called English paper piecing, otherwise known as EPP, and it is so much fun, and it's actually pretty addictive, and I wanted to share it with you guys. So this English paper piecing is a sewing technique that is all done by hand. So this is not a quick project by any stretch of the imagination. This is a long-term slow stitching project. It is very meditative. It's very calming to the nerves, and it's repetitious, and you can just sort of go on autopilot, which I absolutely love. The process, very simple, and you don't need a ton of materials or equipment or anything because it's predominantly you and your hands doing the work. Now, let me show you the back side really quick so you can see all my itty-bitty little teeny-weeny stitches. Is my stitching perfect? No. But, you know, I'm totally down with it. Yeah, so today we're going to be working through the process, going to show you the basics. Now, keep in mind that I am by no means a professional at this. I am a very enthusiastic novice, if you will, but I have been working on this technique now for many months, and I've accumulated a lot of these pieces. In fact, let me show you really quick. Yes, I have been working on this for quite some time. Yeah. This stack here is cumulatively over 1,000 of these little hexagons all stitched together. The reason why I have them in these sort of brick shapes is because after I am done making the necessary number, I would like to lay them out, see that I don't have like a particular concentration in, you know, color or tone in one particular area. I can shift them around, and then when I'm happy with the placement of these blocks, I can then stitch them all together to make myself a quilt. So yeah, this is several months of work, indeed. Oh yes. But the process is, like I said, it is very, very soothing to my senses, and I really, really enjoy doing it, and I think you guys might as well. So let's go into some basic materials that you will need. Okie dokie. So, first things first, well, you don't need this cute little tomato, but as far as needles, some people are very particular about the size and the style of needle. I go very, very basic, you know, some household needles. You know, you don't want the eye to be too large, but other than that, you know, really I would say whatever works for you. As far as thread, well, right now I am using Coates and Clark. It's a hand quilting thread, and it is, let me see here. So it is 88% polyester, 32% cotton. It works for me. Also, as far as color, I like this sort of neutral tone. Black might be a little bit hard on the eyes. White might be a little bit too stark. So I go with a nice neutral shade. That's just me personally. Scissors, you know, nice, sharp, pointy, you know, pretty basic, you know, just itty-bitty little scissors. And, of course, fabric. Well, for me, based on the size of the hexagons that I use, these are absolutely perfect. These are 2.5-inch squares, and I do have a lot of scrap fabric. My mom is also into quilting, and so you could make up some squares from your stash of scraps and remnants and so forth. However, I decided to take a little bit of a shortcut. On Etsy, there are a ton of sellers that have little bundles of, random scraps of fabric, which I really like taking advantage of. There's one vendor in particular, which is called My Fabric Addiction 1. And this particular vendor sells bundles of 200 squares, 2.5 inches by 2.5 inches, 200 squares for about $10.50. Personally, I think that's a bargain because you get a lot of different patterns and colors and so on and so forth. Granted, with this particular seller, there are repeats, but the variety, to me, it's totally worth it, and it saves me a lot of time and effort. Now, also, speaking of saving time and effort, now getting into the actual hexagons. Now, I have a whole bunch that I made already. These you will need in abundance. These are little cardstock hexagons that I've cut out. There are 1,000,001 ways in which you could obtain or create these little hexagons. Some people, they will take a template and trace around it and cut them out individually. That takes a very, very long time. It's very affordable, but time is an even more precious resource to me. So I decided to take a little bit of a shortcut. Yes, this is a hole punch, and so I get cardstock. This is a craft cardstock. I picked this up at Walmart, actually. It's not particularly expensive. And for every sheet, these are 8.5 by 11 sheets of cardstock. For every sheet, I can get 30 of these little guys. Now, I do not reuse them. Once I have, initially used them, I throw them out because they get pretty bent. This is what I particularly choose to do, making my own en masse, because you can purchase little hexagons pre-cut and pre-made with a die cut. However, what if you run out? Well, I like this option because I can make my own very, very quickly. So this particular gadget, this is a Fiskars hole punch. I'm going to put a link to this particular product in the description box down below. You might be able to find it cheaper elsewhere, but this will give you an idea. So going to put a link to that. This is, I want to say, about $30, but when you consider how many of these you're going to need, for my particular project, I'm going to need several thousand of these, okay? No joke. So for me, it is an investment worth having. Just personal opinion, little tips and tricks, anything to make the process easier. Now, another material that you may want to use as far as the basting, you could use a glue stick. Personally, I think it's too much trouble for what it actually is worth, so I don't use anything like that. I just use my needle and thread for the entire process. But yeah, so you know what? Without further ado, let's get into some basting. Okay, so something that I forgot to mention, as far as the hexagons themselves, each side of the hexagon is about 3/4 of an inch, and so that's just one of these sides. Now from tip to tip, it is about 1.5 inches. So this is, I believe, the large, not the extra large hole punch from Fiskars, if I'm not mistaken. Whatever helpful information I can give you, I will do so gladly. So I have a little square here. Got my little cardstock hexie there. First things first, I already threaded my needle, as you can see. We're going to start with a very neat, simple knot. Now, prior to discovering this, I would just take the end of my thread and I would do a little simple knot at the end. However, I have found a method that works even better. Okay, now I understand that my focus is not great and my hands are a little bit shaky, but I'm going to do the very best that I can. So, after you thread your needle and you have the tail end of your thread, grabbing the end of your thread, going to then wrap it around the needle a bunch of times. Now, because I'm only using one strand, I'm not doubling it, I then wrap the thread around the needle about 8 or 9 times to get a really good knot. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And you don't want to go too tightly because you do want to slide this through. So gathering that up, pinching it with my index and thumb, and then just going to slide all of those loops off, still pinching and grabbing. And you have yourself a nice little knot at the end. This does take practice, okay? It took a while for me to get the hang of it. Sometimes I end up with kind of a flat looking sad knot. I just go over it again and it's no problem. But this is a huge game changer as far as making some knots. And I totally recommend the process. So let's get into some basting. Okie dokie. So I've got my little cardboard hexie, I've got my fabric, and as far as exact measurements, you just want to make sure that you have enough fabric around on all sides so that you have enough of a seam allowance. So I already have my needle threaded and knotted, and we are good to go. So the first thing is to fold down your fabric along one side, and then I like to go in a counterclockwise direction. So after pinching that down, then going to go along this edge and fold over and pinch. And then going through this bottom layer and the next layer of fabric, going in like so. And then go through. And then I like to go in through the same spots, relatively speaking, a second time because it sort of locks the stitches into place. Now, it's not basting in the traditional sense because you would just be going sort of in like a running stitch, up, down, all the way around, and the stitches are very easy to remove. However, I like this method more because I don't know how long it is between when I create these and when I actually use them. So I like them to remain very, very secure, if you will. So continuing along to the next side, fold that side over and give it a little pinch, and then going in again through that bottom layer into the top, pull it through, going in again through those same stitches. You don't have to go in through the exact same holes, but the same vicinity. Going on to the next side, fold it over, going in through that bottom layer, through the next layer, pull through, and then through again, folding over that next side, through that bottom, and then through the top. There we go. And then through again. And these stitches do not have to be even remotely neat because we're going to be cutting these strands out and not having to deal with them later. So when you get to this point and you have all this excess, I like to give it a little bit of a trim. Tuck that inside there, and then fold down this last bit. Same process as before, through the bottom, into the top. And again. Once again. Well, this time it's through the top into the bottom, but it is the same concept. And again. And then at the very end, I like to go in to the same area where we started, doing the exact same thing. And then, because I err on the side of paranoia, I like to go in just through this little top bit a couple of times, going through and then putting my needle through that loop, and then pulling it closed. Do that again a couple times, because I don't want this going anywhere, quite frankly. And there you go. And at this point, you can just trim off your thread. And voila, a finished little hexie. And after you're done stitching a bit, you can also remove these basting threads and a little bit more of the excess fabric. Going to show you that. And so after you have amassed a bunch of these, you can get to town. Alrighty. Okay, so now we're going to put some of these together. The only rule that I tend to follow is you don't have two of the same fabrics touching each other, if possible. That's why I like variety. You can, of course, do a very, orchestrated fashion where you have, one color in the center and then do one color for every hex all the way around to make it look sort of like a little flower. That is a particular design called the Grandmother's Garden. I wanted something very, very scrappy, okay? That way, there was no, definitive right or wrong about it. So basically, you're just taking two of your little hexies and scooch the rest off to the side. And I already have my needle pre-threaded. And so you want to have right sides facing together. Line them up. As best as possible. And then what I like to do is scooch underneath this layer here and then pop it out right in the corner. Right there, so that the knot is going to be nice and hidden inside. And then we're going to start doing the whip stitch through the blue and through the pink at the same time. And it's really, really easy. It's very, very simple. And so basically you're just going through a tiny itty bitty little bit through the blue and into the pink. Just an itty bitty little bit. And then go through again right next to it. Sorry, I know my hands are a little bit shaky. So just an itty little bit, you know, maybe like 2 or 3 millimeters away-ish. Again, this is all being done by hand. It does not have to be perfect by any stretch of the imagination. See, a little bit more. There, that's good, right there. So just itty bitty little stitches. And you just keep working your way all the way across this edge. Sometimes what I like to do is, because this tail gets caught up on the rest of the hexie, what I like to do is put the yarn to that side of the needle and then pull through. Sort of a variation of the whip stitch, if you will. But I find that it helps sometimes because I often use a very long tail of thread. And sometimes it does get caught up on my work. Itty bitty little stitches. And also, what is nice about this particular style is that once I get to the end of this side, I don't have to knot and cut my thread right away. No, actually, we can continue going with, see, this is what I'm talking about. This gets sort of hung up there sometimes. We can continue on with the same thread and attach another hexie. And then when you get to the end, oh, see, it happened again. So you want to be careful of that, because if you end up with a loop and you don't catch it quickly enough, that can be a problem later. You know, you want to be mindful of that. But other than that, no, it's really quite easy. And then, so once you reach the end, go through that same loop. And yep, I did it again. Everybody's got to be good at something. Me, it's messing up. There we go. All right, so we have 2 of our hexies stitched together. You know, like I said, is my stitching positively brilliant? No, but it works. It's not going anywhere. And there you go. So from here, we can add an additional hexie, and I'm going to show you how to do that. So let's grab another one and get to it. Okay, so after joining 2 hexies together, we need to get to the point over there. And like I said, we don't need to cut the thread. No, actually, we can go in underneath here and go a little bit further. A little bit further. Thank you. Right through there. And then go through again. And then through that corner, like so. There, and now we are in the right spot for joining up another hexie. These are distracting me. Let me get them out of the way. Okay, so from here, we are all set to add our next hexie. And again, you want to figure what goes well together as far as color, as far as value, etc., etc. So yeah, this one is going to be right in this notch right here. So again, right side facing right side. Line them up and start doing the whip stitch with these two together. Really, really that simple and straightforward. Now, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to work my way across this edge here. Going to finish this off camera, and then I'm going to show you what to do once we reach the sort of the inside of this Y, because that was something that gave me trouble initially until I figured, oh, you know what? We can make this pretty darn simple for ourselves. So I'm just going to work my way across, and I'll meet you when I get up to that little edge there. I'll see you shortly. Okay, so I finished this particular edge, and then if I open it up, we can then stitch these two together. However, you're thinking, all right, yeah, how do I do that? Well, this is the benefit of cardstock that you don't mind throwing away. We're actually going to fold this one here in half from this point to this point, and lining up this hex and this hex so that they are aligned. Very, very simple. Just fold this in half. So we have edge to edge. You don't have to go crazy with a crease, but it's really that easy. And then so that the gray and the pink are now lined up and good to go, you then whip stitch them together until you reach the end of the edge. It's really, really, really that simple. And that is why I said earlier that after I'm done with my hexies, that I just toss them, because yeah, they get folded up a fair amount over time. You know, by the time I'm ready to remove them, yeah, they've pretty much had it. And that is okay. So I'm just going to stitch my way across here, and I will show you the sort of the continuation of what we've already been doing. Adding in yet another hexie, and so on and so forth. Now, as far as the order and system of joining these little guys together, everybody has their own school of thought. That's totally fine. I know what works for me. Eventually, what I do is I create what I call puzzle pieces, and then I add on to those so that eventually I can end up with those bricks that I showed you at the very beginning of the video. All right, so worked my way all the way across there. Then unfold this. And again, I need to get up to that point, right? So scooting underneath here. And then to the corner, like so. Grab another hexie, and it would go like right into this space right here. Line them up and do it all over again. Going across here, opening this up, folding this one in half, and then sewing this one to this one, and so on and so on and so forth. And that's really all there is to it as far as the basics of basting and stitching them together with the whip stitch. And then eventually you end up with a sort of a daisy. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stitch a bunch more together off camera, and I'm going to show you how you can then start removing your cardboard inserts and your basting stitches. So I'm going to get to work, and I'll see you in a bit. All right, so I worked my way around the entirety of my little daisy here with more of the hexes, and now it's at this point that you are able to cut the basting thread and trim up this center one because it is completely surrounded by other hexes. And that is really the only instance in where you can do that. As long as it is completely surrounded by other hexes, the border ones always remain with their little cardboard inserts intact. So what we're going to do now is we're going to remove the basting thread. Now, because of my particular method, it's a little bit more fiddly, but see, I've got my initial knot right there, so I'm going to snip and get in there, snip, and then going to remove the thread. Now, sometimes it's a little bit easier than others. Sometimes it's a little bit more fiddly, but hey, I'm a trooper. And I like to use my scissors because it is easy to get in there, relatively speaking. And all right, so hit a bit of a snag, so that is all right. So I'm going to go in and carefully snip that little loop. There we go. And then pull out my thread there and proceed. So yeah, I mean, if I did the more traditional route of basting, it would be a lot easier to remove that thread. However, it was nice and secure and good to go. Now at this point, I can then trim up this extra fabric a little bit so it's not quite so bulky on the underside. So I do like to leave a little bit of a seam allowance. I don't want to go too terribly close to my stitching, but just trim this up, make it a little bit neater. And because the cardstock is still inside, I don't have to worry quite so much about piercing this fabric here because the cardstock protects it. You do, of course, want to be careful not to cut something that you don't want to cut naturally. There we go. And so just trimming each of these little bits. A little bit easier if I hold it down there. So we're almost there. And then one more. There. Okay, so not much waste in the grand scheme of things. By the way, one thing I would strongly suggest is to have a little container next to your workspace to catch all of your threads and little bits and so on and so forth. This is just an old Chinese takeout soup container, and these are really, really worth having around because you end up with a ton of little bits after a while, let me tell you. So at this point, now that the fabric has been trimmed away, the basting thread has been removed, now, quite simply, we can remove this little cardstock insert, and as you can see, it has seen some better days. So yeah, I toss these, and there you go. A finished little flower, daisy, etc., etc. Now, like I said before, if you wanted to do a grandmother's garden style, so you would have, one color in the center and then just one color surrounding that and then one color surrounding that so that you have a cute little flower. I like the scrappy version. That's just me. Now, once you have this basic form, you can go up a step or 2 or 3 or what have you. I'm going to show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so after you have your basic flower shape, which is a total of 7, what I like to do is I like to add an additional 3 hexes to the basic flower, 3 on one side, and this is, I call it a puzzle piece, quite frankly. And I like to make a whole bunch of these. Basically, you just add on 3 more hexes to one side, and then this is the basis for my bricks, as I showed in the very beginning. So what I do is I grab one of these, and then got another one, and so at this point, I know I'm sort of overthinking things, but it's at this point that you would then sew these together along this edge here, and you would have this basic shape here, and then you'd grab another 2, and you would sew these together like so, and then put this one next to this one, and you would have a finished brick. Now, the reason why I'm stressing this point is when you are initially sewing these together, the finished product would look like this, okay? Now, this being said, when I was first starting to put my puzzle pieces together and make this basic shape, I made a bit of a boo-boo, but I wanted to save the boo-boo to show you what happened. What I did was, instead of this shape, taking this piece and stitching them together in this formation here. Okay, what I did was I did this instead. And as a result, I ended up with this piece. And I was like, wait a minute, why doesn't this fit? Because I had one of these, and then I had one of these, and it doesn't work, as you can see. Does not fit together nice and neat, whether you have it one side or the other side. So if I take one of those and then one of these, you can see that the edge works. So you want to be careful about how you sew your puzzle pieces together. And then when you have 2 of these and you sew them together, you then end up with what I call a brick, or a nice block. And this is a total of 40 little hexes sewn together. And like I said before, I am right now in the process of amassing a whole bunch of these bricks so that I can then lay them out and figure out, all right, does this look good? Does your eye flow and travel throughout the piece, or does it get stuck in a particular area as far as, tone, value, too much orange or too much red, or, that sort of thing. Because once you stitch them together, yeah, that's it. So I like the ability to play around with the positioning first and then lock it in and, finalize things. And yeah, so there you go. English paper piecing. Alrighty, my dears, so that's going to conclude today's tutorial on how to do English paper piecing. As I said before, it is a very long-term project with a lot of slow stitching involved, and for this, it's really about the journey, not about the destination. And I really love the process. It's very mindful. It's very relaxing. It's a great way to use up little scrap bits of fabric, and it is extremely portable. You can use, your little squares of fabric, your little hexies, small pair of scissors, put it in a Ziploc bag, boom, you're good to go. Whether you are stuck at a doctor's office, waiting in line somewhere, perfect for travel, absolutely love that. And it is a nice, quiet, meditative, restful kind of project. I love it. And I hope you guys do too. I know that this is very much a departure from my usual tutorials, but it is something that I've been doing for quite some time, and I wanted very much to share it with you guys. And I hope you like it. If you did, please give a little thumbs up button down below. You know that I appreciate your appreciation as always. And stay tuned for more, whether it is sewing, crocheting, knitting, origami, cooking, audiobook narrations, you name it. I'm all over the place. Stay tuned for more. Hit that subscribe button. And you know what to do until next time, right? I want all of you to stay inspired, stay caffeinated, perhaps not so much as I am. Stay stitching and stay safe. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I will see you in my next video. Bye for now, everybody, and have a great day.